Chapter 11. While I was dressing for the PTA meeting, I consulted my not very observant husband. He was never much help in this regard, but I asked him anyway. What am I going to wear? He obviously wasn't listening. Anything. Something countryish? Now that we had a goat, I considered myself a bona fide member of the farm fraternity. Maybe my red socks? He was suddenly listening. Not your red socks. When I got to the meeting, I saw I needn't have worried. I was welcomed with enthusiasm. The women, though as varied as dogs in a city pound, managed to meet together as a friendly body with a common interest. I was surprised at this after the briefing from my caller. I planned to tell Arlo about it that evening at the peg, but he was a mouthful of nasty words ahead of me. Do you know what that big kid of yours did? I tried to humor him. Well, yes and no. If it was early in the morning, he was sleeping. Arlo ignored my attempt at wit. He came down to my place. I saw him sneaking around heading for the shed where I keep the Shetland ponies. He jumped on my old pony and was heading out into the field. I yelled at him, and he slid off and came back. I was glad that at least Sig had been obedient. Arlo continued. I gave him a good talking to, told him to never come down to my place again. I was sorry for that, but when Arlo began comparing Sig to those darn kids in the valley, something snapped. I wanted to fight back, but Arlo continued. I could use help in the barn, but all they want to do is lounge around on their backsides. They don't even want to walk to school. Their mothers are trying to get the school district to buy a bus, increase my taxes so their little darlings can ride. Arlo didn't look like he'd ever walked to school. He raved on. They could pick berries. Carter up here's got a big field, but she's always having trouble with the kids throwing berries. Your kid won't last a day. I'd had it up to my earlobes. I'm sorry for Sig's behavior. I'll get after him. I turned and walked into the house. I didn't know whether to ground my errant son or go out and buy a horse. I ended up giving him a lecture about respecting other people's property, the intolerance of people who don't have children, and how most men are harder on boy children than on girl children. And if for no other reason, it is best to stay away. And I'll give you another reason. If you don't stay away, I'll see that the seat of your pants is a lot sorer than it would be from riding a pony. At the next prayer meeting, one of the good sisters asked how we were getting along with our horse. I said, we didn't get a horse, we got a... Oh, you didn't get a horse. No, we got a goat. A goat? Well, let me see. She checked her list. I don't think we prayed about a goat, did we? Corey muttered under his breath. You better not have. One of the deacons spoke up. Well, we should have known you get a goat instead of a horse. Being Norwegian like you are. I read somewhere, National Geographic maybe, that they have more goats in Norway than they have. He was interrupted by another of Corey's enthusiastic friends. Gosh, Corey, what do you do with a goat? A long pause, during which everyone seemed to be waiting breathlessly for an answer, was finally interrupted when my soft-hearted friend Hazel rushed in, saying she'd been to see friends who had a sick baby. And they don't have any money for heat, and they need medicine tonight, and... Questions and answers and fervent prayer followed. There was talk of taking up a collection. Then Hazel recalled, well, they do have things they've been trying to sell. A bed, and a few odds and ends, and a horse. Every ear in the place picked up. A horse! Hazel collected her memory. Oh, Fran, I think you went out and saw their horse a while back. Remember Bill? I did, vaguely. Bill has reduced the price. Enthusiasm from the congregation was overwhelming. Weren't we the ones for getting prayers answered? The meeting was adjourned with the pastor's little homily on how when the Lord answered prayer, he expected us to take action. And that's how it was that Corey and I found ourselves out on a dark and stormy night, lost on a little country road. Now go back to the railroad tracks and turn left, I directed. Corey was grumpy. I think I'll go back to the railroad tracks and head home. But you can't. They need the medicine tonight. Just saying the words gave me a Florence Nightingale rush. Corey groaned. So we gotta go out on a dark and stormy night to buy a horse because somebody's baby is sick and they need medicine? You sound heartless. I am. He was. As an employer, he'd had years of experience with this kind of thing. Desperate calls at the first flake of snow from guys to whom he'd paid top wages all summer. Gosh, Corey, my uncle in Minnesota just died. My wife needs an operation. I'm short of money. You're sure this is the horse you want to buy? I wasn't sure at all. At the railroad tracks, Corey turned left, and in a few blocks I recognized the dilapidated gate. A lank, ragged individual came out on the rickety porch rubbing his eyes. Corey defined our mission, and the man I now recognized as Bill, led us out to the broken-down cherry tree, where we could barely make out the shape of a horse. Bill focused a flashlight, burning its last watt, on bony legs and a scrubby mane and tail. Name's Saudi. She's Arabian. It was the old gray mare, dappled gray, Bill called it. It was the least lovely of all the horses we had seen, and I couldn't spot a single dapple. Corey turned to me. What do you think? The only thing I could think was that the price was right. Bill was pushing the sale. Can deliver her first thing in the mornin'. The words were no sooner out of his mouth than a fragile young woman dressed in the shabbiest clothes I had ever seen appeared on the front porch, babe in arms, and peeped the most desperate question I had ever heard. Did you get the money? My heart broke. I was a mother too. And I was poor too. But I had never seen poor like this kind of poor. I felt rich by comparison. I gave Corey my gentle missionary touch. He said, yeah. Got a bridle? Bill asked. We hadn't thought about that. Bill produced a couple of pieces of old leather held together with rivets. Y'all can have it for $5. See there, I was glad I'd saved out money for expenses. How are your fences? What did we need of fences? We had a broken-down apple tree. On the way home, I recalled, gee, I didn't look at her teeth. But it was too late. The big question the next morning was, where'll we put her? Corey unplugged the toaster to plug in his razor, a precaution against blowing out the fuses. Put her in the pasture below the house. Go out and check the fence posts. There's about a 10-foot section open. There's wire in the barn. You can get started, and I'll be home early. Don't worry, your friend won't be here until late. I was touchy. My friend. What makes you think he won't be here until late? She's paid for in full. That was one time Corey's predictions didn't come true. We had just gathered outside. Jingle Bells was racing around like the Pony Express. Goaty was butting the bucket of nails. Jack, the son of our neighbors who built their house too close to our property line, was telling us we didn't have the right materials and didn't know the first thing about stringing wire. Hey, here comes your horse. I hoped not. It was too early. But there was the truck rocking from side to side up the badly rutted road. When it turned into our drive, I got a lump in my throat, just like the kids. Oh boy! Bill climbed out of the cab and began to unload her. Hey, that there road's bad. It's gonna wash out. Jack said, I know that. Bill put the bridle on the horse, and without giving us a long list of do's and don'ts, except to tell us we'd better get a better fence than that, he left. Freya's friend Judy Poet arrived. I was relieved. She owned a little bay mare, and was what we considered an experienced horsewoman. What kind of horse did you get? Sig sprouted proudly. She's half Arabian and half mare. Not surprisingly, that turned out to be the neighborhood joke. Freya and Judy fed her oatmeal out of the Quaker Oats carton, and the kids took turns riding her along the driveway. She didn't behave at all well, but I chalked it up to the kids' inability. Plus old age on the part of the horse. When everyone was tired out, Jack took charge. Where do you want to put her? In the pasture where we strung the wire. But it isn't all the way around. I told him something I had figured out all by myself. We'll take her to the far side and lead her around there a little. Then, when we take off her bridle, she'll begin to eat, and she'll never know she isn't all fenced in. Jack looked skeptical, but did what I said. The second the bridle was off, she raised her tail, threw back her head, and galloped full speed along the fence line. I couldn't believe my eyes. She had the grace and beauty of the dapple grays in Napoleon's Imperial Guard. Out of the unwired section she raced. She didn't stop there. Down the driveway and down the road she ran. My heart sank into the heels of my red knee socks. Would she try to follow Bill? 21 miles to the other side of town? I pictured her galloping up Main Street, scaring women and children, upsetting baby carriages, knocking over sidewalk displays. We'd probably get hauled into court. They'd sue us for everything we had, except the horse. Have you got a bucket of grain? Jack yelled. Freya ran for the Quaker Oats carton. Sig ran to the barn and came back with a coil of scaffolding rope. Eric ran and got his cowboy hat. I ran in a circle, wringing my hands. If only Corey was here. Why is he always gone when we need him? Jack yelled. She stopped down by Callahan Road. Before I could warn them about horses kicking and things like that, Jack and Sig were off in pursuit. I wrung my hands, wondering whether to call the police or the National Guard, or whether to just sit down and have a good ball. Finally, Freya called, They've got the horse. They came up the road, stopping occasionally for Saudi to get her nose down in the Quaker Oats box, or eat the grass by the side of the road. When they led her up the driveway, she quivered like a racehorse with a wild look in her eye, pitching and bucking. Jack tied the reins to a fence post, but in no time at all, she had uprooted that and was heading back down the road with the post bouncing between her legs. Sig and Jack ran and caught her again. We were running out of Quaker Oats. Sig ran for the heavy scaffolding rope, and we tied one end around her neck and the other around the telephone pole. I figured to give her plenty of rope, but that was wrong too. She ran full speed. When she got to the end of the rope, she was thrown into the air and came down with a thundering crash. On the next run, she got her feet tangled in the rope, and that threw her with equal force. Jack stood beside me, out of the horse's range, awaiting orders. "That horse is gone plumb loco." I couldn't tell him what to do. I couldn't even think. I was terrified. After one hard spill, Jack ran toward the pole. "Jack, come back!" I screamed. "She'll kill you." Jack made it to the pole. Then, using the pole as a guard between himself and the horse, he began to take in the slack, shortening the rope each time she came toward him. At last he had her head pinned against the pole, but her feet were braced. She was restrained but not conquered. "Now what'll I do?" Jack yelled. I still couldn't think, but I knew Jack couldn't hold her that way all day. His mother was sure to call and tell me to send him home. "Hold her a minute, Jack, please." I ran into the house, straight into the bedroom. I fell on my knees beside the bed. Oh God, what'll I do? I waited until my heart calmed down. Then I jumped to my feet and ran outside. "Can we lead her?" "Yeah, but where?" It was so obvious. Why hadn't we thought of it before? "To the barn." We got her there, shut the door, and she spent the afternoon kicking out the south wall. When Arlo came with the milk that night, she was still kicking. "Sounds like someone sold you a wild horse," he said. I explained something I knew he would understand. "Yeah, their baby is sick and needs medicine.